I cannot be silent.
Back when Eisenhower was the president, golf courses is where most of his time was spent. So I never really listened to what the president said, because in general I believed that the general was politically dead. But he always seemed to know when the muscles were about to be flexed, because I remember him saying something, mumbling something about a military-industrial complex.
As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our home nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problem, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent.
Each one reach one, each one time.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.
Empowering the body, mind, and spirit. This is We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the December 29th broadcast of We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney. It's hard to believe that we're here at the end of another year, December 29th, 2014. And today we have a very, very special guest, a woman that many of you listening already know and appreciate very much. I know Larry and I do, and her name is Joyce Riley. And Joyce Riley is a whistleblower, an activist, and a longtime radio show host of the very popular morning radio program, The Power Hour with Joyce Riley. And I'm going to read a little bit of our intro here, and then bring Larry in to say hello to Joyce and welcome our guest himself and bring her on air. Joyce Riley is an outspoken upholder of American ideals and traditions with seemingly limitless charisma. She is fueled by her desire to keep Americans informed of the challenges this country is faced with every day and to find the truth. Miss Riley is a graduate of the University of Kansas with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Her areas of nursing specialty are nursing administration. She served as a director of nursing in 4 institutions: medical surgical nursing and organ transplantation. Joyce Riley has presented at the National Institutes of Health, medical legal conferences such as the American Trial Lawyers Association. She has also hosted the Power Hour radio show for 10 years. I imagine that might be even a few more, and has been a guest on over 1,500 radio and television shows, including Art Bell, Chuck Harder, and Michael Reagan. Her experience as a medical legal testifying expert in medical malpractice trials gave her the background to investigate the truth about the Gulf War illness. She has since become an advocate for all veterans and citizens experimented upon by our government. Joyce was a whistleblower in the famous baby death case in which Nurse Genene Jones, who is now serving a life sentence in Texas prison, was convicted of causing injury to many babies in the Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. Miss Riley served as a captain in the United States Air Force and flew on C-130 missions in support of Operation Desert Storm. She remains a spokesperson for the American Gulf War Veterans Association, whose purpose is to provide education and information for the Gulf War veterans and their families, and to seek treatment for the illnesses that thousands of Gulf War veterans now suffer from. For more on the Power Hour with Joyce Riley, please visit the website at www.thepowerhour.com. And we're very, very happy to have Joyce Riley with us today. And I know Larry is probably going to want to say a few words and welcome Joyce onto the program. Larry?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Phil. All I can say, frankly, is that Joyce Riley is one of my sheroes. You dig? She is one of the sisters that I have an enduring love and respect for. I have learned so much from this sister. She has taught me, whether she knows it or not, she knows it now, she has taught me a great deal about the struggle for humanity. I love you, Joyce. I'm honored beyond words. I simply cannot adequately convey how deeply honored we are to have you on We Cannot Be Silent. Love you, my sister, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, and it's such an honor to be on your show, and I know this being close to the end of the year for you, I really thank you very much for allowing me to have this time with your audience and to share information with them, because we have a huge, huge job ahead of us, and we need everybody out there that is committed and that understands what freedom means and what loss of freedom means also.
That's for sure. And we're very happy that you could make the time for us as well, Joyce. And as I mentioned earlier, we probably have a lot of our listeners who are already familiar with you and the Power Hour. I myself became aware of you and your program in 2005 when somebody handed me a copy of the DVD In Plain Sight, which pulled the curtain back on the false flag attack of 9/11/01, and it was there that I looked on the case of the DVD, and it was put out by thepowerhour.com, and I went to there, and I also quickly learned of the other film that you're responsible for, dealing with the depleted uranium and the Gulf War illness, and that film Beyond Treason, another wonderful documentary. And from there, I tuned into thepowerhour.com and learned that you all had a radio program, and that's how I came to meet you. For those who are just meeting you now, would you mind giving us a little background on yourself, Joyce Riley herself, and how eventually the Power Hour radio show came to be?
Well, certainly, and thank you for this time, and again to you and all the people that fight this fight out there, to no matter how many people we have that are listening, or how many people we have that follow us and that pay attention, you know, there's always somebody new listening, and there's always a person who is hearing for the first time the story that they've been lied to, and that this country is involved in such huge, huge fraud. And the fraud is just mammoth. It's everywhere. It's in the news today, yesterday, and will be tomorrow, because nothing is based on the truth any longer. You know, I became involved in the issue of the truth when I was in nursing school. There were things that happened that I saw that happened, and people were told to don't pay attention to it, or don't say anything about it, or don't tell. And this shocked me, because I'd been raised in Kansas. I was a believer that everybody does the right thing, and that everybody tells the truth. And I learned that that was not true. When I became a nurse, there were a number of issues that happened that were huge. I want to tell you about one. I was just talking about this the other day. I was working at a hospital in Miami, Florida, South Miami, Florida. And there was a young boy that was brought in. He was 16 years old, and he was a young black male brought in with a shotgun, or a shot to the head. And he was obviously in very bad shape and would have taken neurosurgery, would have taken a lot of things to save this man. Well, this was not an area where we had a large black population. And I recall that the person that took care of this patient, this young 16-year-old boy, was told by the neurosurgeon to put him on the second floor in a room, close the door, and put him in a head-down position, reverse Trendelenburg, a head-down position. And at the time, I didn't understand. I didn't even have a concept of what was going on. Until later, what I realized was they were just wanting this young boy to bleed out and die. And that is exactly what happened. And I was so naive and so innocent from the standpoint of believing that a neurosurgeon would do that, that later I was shocked to even believe that we had, that this thing had happened, that this experience had taken place at that hospital. And to this day, I don't know why that was not my first attempt at whistleblowing, but I was shocked beyond belief and devastated that that kind of thing could happen, that they would literally put a boy on his head, let him bleed out, and then they called the doctor. The doctor left an order, call me when he's dead. I mean, to think that this goes on in medicine, to think that people participate in this. So that was one of the first experiences. And I had another experience in upstate New York when I was living there. And a lady came into my office who was the director of medical records, and she said to me, I was in an administrative position in nursing, and she said, we've got to go to the director of nursing and tell her what just happened. And I said, well, what just happened? And she said, they came in and told me to destroy all the medical records on this one patient. I said, well, what happened? And she said, this lady had never been able to get pregnant. She'd had to have a number of DNCs, and she was just never going to get pregnant. So this time they didn't do a pregnancy test. They took her in because she hadn't had a period in 3 months. They took her into surgery, did a DNC without a pregnancy test, and aborted a healthy child. Or it was several months. I don't remember how many months it was. And aborted this child. And I could not stand this. It was a Catholic hospital. And it's one where they came by and did, mass or did communion every morning. And they had aborted a normal fetus. And so I then went to the director of nursing, and I said, we have got to do something about this. These people need to know that they just had a child that was normal that was aborted. And she came to me, she took me aside, and she said, you're no longer needed at this hospital. Your things will be delivered to you, and within 5 hours, leave the hospital immediately, and security will see you out. Now, that is what happens in a hospital when somebody decides to tell the truth. And I experienced many of those situations. I could go on and on of those situations. But that is what got me into the position of saying, wait a minute, if I am complicit in this, I am part of the problem. I am as guilty as the person doing it, almost. And so that's when I had to start taking a stand. And I did, and it cost me dearly all my life, because you cannot take a stand. I don't care if it's in nursing or engineering or in government or in nuclear power plants or anything else. You cannot tell the truth and stay around very long.
Now, Joyce, a quick question. Now, were you a young nurse right out of nursing school, and is this when this happened, or if so, was that just following graduating high school? I believe you were born and raised in Kansas? If I'm
Yes,
not
I went
mistaken.
to KU, nursing school for 5 years. And
Yes.
yes, this was right out of nursing school. These things
So you
happen.
were a young, ideal, what's the right word? Ideological.
Yeah, I was too innocent for my own good, and I was too naive. But yet I have to say, though, Philip, is that most nurses have never, ever talked about these events that they've been involved in. And there are many, many, many. Most people never, ever say anything about what happens in a hospital. I could tell you all kinds of experiences that happened, but they don't ever complain. They don't say anything. And so eventually, I think when the situation happened with Genene Jones, the nurse that killed all those babies in San Antonio, and I found out that the hospital knew about it, knew that she was killing babies, but let her continue to do it because they didn't want the bad press that the hospital was going to get if they were to call the Attorney General's office or the DA's office. Then I realized, oh my God, now we're into murder. And so that's when I had to take a stand then, and that cost me dearly. And that's why I really had to leave Texas or leave San Antonio. And I went to Houston to work at that time, then unfortunately became involved in another whistleblower case there. And it's not because I'm just the one that's telling the truth or wanting to create a situation of what's happening. It was because these things happen all the time, and people don't realize it. And that's the sad part, is that many of the deaths in hospitals are due to negligence and due to just absolute, either not paying attention to what needs to be done or not adhering to the rules or wanting to cover up and not wanting anybody to know, of course, what really happened. And so, I mean...
Well, that's a tough pill to swallow. You grow up thinking I'm going to be a nurse, and what is it? The oath of the medical profession: do no harm, and help if you can, but certainly do no harm. And then right off the bat, you step into this, and welcome to the real world, huh? Larry, the way this sounds, Joyce fits right in with the theme of our program. We cannot be silent. Joyce is one of those people that couldn't be silent when experienced this.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, as I was listening, to Sister Joyce talk and convey her experiences, I was thinking to myself that, you see, I've said this before, that within all of us is, or at least should be, some spiritual, and I'm not talking religious here, I'm talking spiritual, some aspect of our own humanity. And what Joyce has conveyed to me simply reiterates and reconfirms the fact that Joyce is about humanity. She's about doing the right thing, doing not what's expedient, not the expedient thing, but the right thing. And so even as horrible as those experiences were, I still think and thought to myself as Joyce was talking that, yes, but she reached down within her inner soul, and and when I say soul, I mean the depths of her humanity, D-E-P-T-H-S, the depths of her humanity, and she said, you know what? I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm human. And it just makes me proud of Joyce, and we need, I'd say 2-3 more million Joyce Rileys out there, at least. And, so that's what I was thinking, Phil and Joyce. Joyce, as you were talking, that's what I was thinking.
Larry, that's what bonds me to people like you and Philip. That's where we come together. That's why we have this incredible desire to want to hear each other, listen to each other, share each other's stories, because you inspire me. Phil inspires me. We inspire each other. You know, you cannot motivate anyone to do anything. I can't motivate anyone to even tell the truth. I can't motivate anyone to even brush their teeth. I can inspire them, hopefully. You can inspire people to do things, and that's why it's so important, I think, that people hear these stories, real stories of real people who've been there, and how they handled it, and how they dealt with the challenge. I mean, your story about when you were in prison, that just, I mean, I could not hear that story enough. And every time you're on the show, I love hearing that, because what you did, that's the closest thing to what is real and honest. You know, we say all the time, do the next right and honorable thing. And what you did in prison is the closest thing to that I can imagine anybody doing. And we need to hear these stories, and listeners need to hear these stories, because I bet you anything, there are people sitting in the audience right now saying, you know what, honey, I was involved in a situation 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and I should have told the truth, and I didn't. Well, sometimes it's never too late, and sometimes it may be, I don't know. But each person has to decide that on their own. But you see, it's not a matter of just being a whistleblower, which has gotten a bad name, because people think that you whistleblow because you want money or you want recognition or you want something. Whistleblowing is when you can't take it any longer, in my estimation, of dealing with the lies and the pain and the anguish that people experience, that you have to say something. You have to do something. Yes. When Genene Jones was killing those babies in San Antonio, Texas, at Bexar County Hospital, when she was killing those babies, I happened to be doing rounds there, and it just so happened I was placed in that unit to do rounds in the neonatal intensive care unit. And when I did, I saw that the nurses told me about how many babies had been dying. They said, all these babies are dying in our unit, and this has never happened before. So I started looking at the records, and I found out that the babies were dying on one nurse's shift. One nurse and one 3 to 11 shift. And that was Genene Jones. So I did my evaluation of all of that statistically. I took it to my boss, and I said to Mr., I believe his name was White, I said, sir, I need to tell you that I think they are killing babies in that unit, and it's one nurse that's doing it, Genene Jones. And he told me at that point, you will never, ever work again. You will be sued, and sued for slander, and fired if you ever tell anybody that again. And I'm thinking to myself, now wait a minute, I just told you babies are dying, and you are threatening me with firing me? Are you kidding me? And I cannot tell you the pain and anguish after that happened, because then I went to the director of nursing. I went to the board of directors of the hospital. I went to everywhere. It was part of the University of Texas Health Science Center facility, and I went everybody that I could go to. And they all told me, you'll be fired, you'll be sued for slander, don't you ever say this again. You are the one that's crazy. Nobody's doing anything here. You're the one that's crazy. And I said, look, I can show you the information here. And again, at 27 years of age, they were trying to discount everything that I said, as, 27 years of age as a young nurse. But then I found out later, and the case is still in contention too, by the way, because they now are going to let her out of prison. They're trying to find a cold case. And they've contacted me to be involved in a cold case investigation on this Genene Jones case. But she has killed, I say, allegedly, over 60 babies. She was only sent to prison for one, death of an infant and injury to a child. But there were over 60 that she killed that we know of. And this went on for 2 years. And then they finally told her that they just needed her to go to another hospital and work. They were no longer going to let her work there, and they transferred her to another place or asked her to leave, when in reality she went on to kill babies at that other hospital in Texas, and she continued the killing there, and that's where she was caught. But what kind of a human being does it take to know that babies are being killed and tortured? I mean, Genene would play with those babies like a cat with a wounded bird. And she would allow those babies to be injured over and over again. Some of them, we believe, 2 to 3 times, horribly injured, before she finally killed them. I mean, what kind of a human being does it take to do that? And then, what kind of a human being does it take to be the attorney for the hospital and all those people that were involved in that cover-up, which I later saw the records, to allow that to happen? It just isn't even, there's no way you can comprehend that there are human beings alive that do that. And many of those human beings are still alive that were involved in that cover-up. And that's still the biggest murder case in Texas, the Genene Jones case. It's Genene Jones case, and she is right now a prisoner at Gatesville Prison in Texas. But what kind of human being allows that to take place and then to cover it up? And I know there's a girl named Renee that calls in all the time to our program, and she always says this thing. She says, the people who are complicit in the cover-up are just as guilty. And I wish people understood that. Just because you didn't do the act, just because you covered up the act, doesn't mean you're not guilty. You absolutely are just as guilty. And these things need to be stopped. And only when people come forward, and because of inspiration of shows like this, where people can hear and other people say, not no, but heck no, you cannot do that, then will it stop.
Boy, that really is something. And you asked the question, what kind of people can allow this to happen? I just want to jump back a little. You first brought this to the attention of doctors on staff or superiors who were medical professionals, or to the administrators?
Well, we talked to everybody, literally. We talked to everybody.
You talked to your fellow nurses and the doctors, and what a shock that must have been for you to get that response right off the bat. You and Larry have been at this a lot longer than I have. I know after seeing your the film In Plain Sight by the Power Hour back in 2005, I thought, Joyce, naively, but like you, I saw something wrong, and Larry has this within his own self. I saw something wrong, and by automatically, I spoke up and said, "Hey, something's wrong here. This 9/11 was a inside job. We need to get this out and stop these wars and bring these guys to." And I really thought if I just brought it to the attention of my fellow Americans, just my fellows, that they would think the same. And it's been a real frustrating, disappointing dose of reality over these past 10 years to have our fellow humans, our neighbors, anyone you bring this to the attention to, reject it so much, so many of them. Larry, when you were coming up, you were raised in Maryland, I believe, and both your parents were educators, and my understanding is you got a very good upbringing, and you were taught morals and values, and until you got a little older and got your own taste of the real world. What was your experience when you first woke up to, let's say, the real world, like Joyce did?
Shock. When I was a kid, right? I grew up in D.C. and Maryland, Washington, D.C. and Maryland, before I went to California and joined the Black Panther Party. But I remember as a kid, I had this cousin, girl cousin, right? And I just adored her. I thought she was all that. She was, too. But anyway, she was older than me, so I looked up to her and blah, blah, blah. And we used to sit back I think it came on at 12 midnight. And occasionally my parents would actually allow me, if it was on a weekend, if I was with my cousin, to sit up and watch a show called Shock, right? and that's really was the name of the show. Usually Vincent Price or somebody like that was in the show. So to answer your question, what was my response? Well, I tell you my response. People often ask me, well, what made you, for example, why did you even join the Black Panther Party? Both of your parents were school teachers. You all weren't rich, but my goodness, you could have pursued something else. And what made me join the party was one day, fool that I was, not that I was really a fool at all, but like Joyce, I had just come from watching a political rally, being there personally and watching various people speak, and I was like, wow, people do think like me, right? And there I was in my little shirt and tie. I was probably the only one out of 3,000 people who had a shirt and tie on, but there I was. And so I was thinking when the rally was over, this was in Los Angeles, I got on the city transit bus because I was working in a restaurant at the time and in high school, a senior in high school. I got on the city transit bus and, was going to work, gonna go do my shift. And I saw these two Black Panthers get on. And I talk about them as if they were older than me. Actually, they weren't. They were my age. We were all the same. So I see these two young guys get on the bus. They're disciplined. They were very disciplined, very polite. And so, of course, being the way I was raised, I'm looking at them. I'm going, wow, we could use a little discipline, a lot of discipline in our communities. We could use service to the community. But the next thing I knew was the bus driver had pulled the bus over. Joyce, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but the bus driver...
No, I'm interested.
The bus driver pulled the bus over, Joyce, and next thing I knew, there were LAPD cops getting on the bus with guns drawn, .357 Magnums. Here I am in my little suit and tie, little young black guy thinking. So what did I do? I did just like you did, Joyce. Without even thinking, I just did, I don't even know if it was the right thing. Well, it was the right thing, but I did the human thing. I stood up and I said, what are you all doing? Because they had guns to the head of these two young men, okay? And I said, what are you doing? They haven't done anything. What are you doing? Well, of course, they put a gun to my head, pulled me out, whipped up on me, and the next day or two, I joined the Panther Party. But, you just do the human thing. You do the right thing. And that's one of the things, my sister, that I admire so much about you and people like you, like Cynthia McKinney, because we know we're going to have prices and consequences. We might be in shock, but once we do it, we don't stop. We don't turn around. And you've never stopped, Joyce. You've never turned around. You just keep forging on. And this is the inspiration, to use your word, that we need to have with each other, with one another. So I'm grateful for people like you, because without without people like you, my sister, there wouldn't be me. So I want to thank you right now.
Well, that is so kind of you. But the people that have gone before us and who have done these things, I don't care what names you would give them, and there's so many well-known people that have been there before us. Those people all contributed by doing the next right and honorable thing so that we could come forward and it would be a little bit easier for us to tell the truth. Because telling the truth is an incredibly difficult thing. I mean, telling the truth has been the hardest thing about my life. If I had not told the truth, and if I had let go of all those issues, whether it had to do with depleted uranium or 9/11 or whatever, my life would have been so much easier. But it wasn't supposed to be. And I do believe that everything that we have ever done has brought us to where we are, and that we have a journey. And that journey is comprised of those things that that bring us closer, I believe, to God, that bring us closer to what our purpose in life is. And we must follow that. We absolutely must follow it. If we don't, we will go against ourselves. We cannot, and we cannot live like that. We cannot live like that. And I know, that's why I respect people so much. And I would drive across the country to meet somebody like you all, whereas I wouldn't go across the street to see somebody like, Barbara Streisand, because that doesn't interest me. Mm-hmm. What interests me is the truth, and people that have stood for the truth. That's where it gets so hard. Anybody can tell the truth, but when it costs you something, that's when it gets really tough.
Yes, and I do need to interject here. I neglected to make the announcement that the wolfspiritradio.com network is 100% listener supported, and that allows us to not be beholden to any other influences. But since that's the case, that means we need donations to keep programs like this on the air, so we could have wonderful guests like Joyce Riley. Yes.
I'd like to say something about donations, because it is incredibly important that people support these radio networks that are telling the truth. If you don't, you will have none of them in the future, because it is expensive to support a radio network. And I just want to reiterate what you said, that everybody ought to be doing their part in paying. If you're not a whistleblower, you're not out there doing something that's, setting the world on fire, help support people like Philip and Larry and what they're doing, because you can do your part that way. It is absolutely so important we have free networks. If we don't have truth networks out there, we don't have access to the information that we need to get. And if you don't have the people inspiring you to do the good and the right thing, then it'll be gone. It will be gone. There won't be those people willing to do it. So I hope that everybody will look at what they can do to help support Wolf Spirit and keep these people on the air, because they've done the hard part. Larry Pinckney did the hard part. He spent 10 years in prison. He walked the walk. He's done the hard part. He looks good, smells good, walks good, talks good. I mean, he is a guy who has done it all. And now he's bringing it to you and saying, here's what you can do. But you've got to support them and keep them on the air, because they can't support doing radio shows. There's no money to be made in radio shows. And I just encourage you to support them and do what you can to keep them on the air, because it is just absolutely invaluable. There's no way to put any kind of value or any kind of monetary value on how much the truth means in coming to you. So please, please support the network. I just wanted to say that.
Why, thank you, Joyce. And if it's listener supported, then there's more chance for the truth. It's one of the things, of the many things we appreciate with the Power Hour, which again broadcasts Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Central Time. And you can link into that, thepowerhour.com. And it's a wonderful program. I've been listening for a number of years. Joyce, for those who, myself included, I'm curious as to, okay, you went right to work into nursing after college, and then you spoke up when it's the right thing to do, and I'm sure it was quite disappointing to see those around you stay quiet and not speak up. When did you make your way to the radio show, The Power Hour, and how did that come to be? And maybe you can give us a little history on it.
Well, I think my passion for the truth really came out after I served in Desert Storm. Because what I saw happening was in 1990 and 1991, I served as a flight nurse, then went back and believed that I was doing the right thing. And then I found out that all the people were dying after the Gulf War. And I found out they were sick with illnesses that nobody was talking about, nobody was telling the truth about. And so I had this passion in 1991, after the Gulf War, that I started doing research to find out who is lying, who is not telling the truth about this. And from about then until 1996, I really got involved in the documentation to find out that the government was lying about vaccines, experimental vaccines, etc., about depleted uranium and those kinds of things. So then in about 99, I had been doing a radio show in Houston, Texas called Nurse Talk Radio. So I started out there, and that's when I met Dave Von Kleist a little bit later on. He was doing a radio show in Connecticut, and we decided to do a show, and we started the Power Hour back in about 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. And it was because of the passion for the veterans issue. I wanted just like you said, Philip, you wanted a platform to talk about 9/11, and you thought the world would, when the world hears about this, they're going to understand that this is all a fraud on the people. Well, I thought the same thing was going to happen when people heard about the Gulf War illness. They're going to realize the government's been lying to them. They sprayed them, or they have hit them with depleted uranium. They've hit them with experimental vaccines. They've hit them with chemicals, biologicals. They've lied to the people. And I thought the world was going to understand, and they were going to take up arms and practically go to the Department of Defense and say, how dare you for killing our troops? But it didn't happen, because they have more fax machines, they have more computers, they have more PR people, and they are able to drown out those of us if we don't have a voice, and if we don't have a chance to do a radio show or get access to the media. So we started on Genesis Network in about 2001 with talking about the Gulf War illness issue. And that's when I gained a lot of attention for the fact that that the government was covering up what was really going on with the Gulf War illness. So that's how we started the Power Hour. And I'll tell you, when I first started the Power Hour, nobody called in, nobody even listened to us. We offered a free album of Dave's music if anybody would just call into the Power Hour. And it took us weeks before anyone ever, in fact, was listening to call in to get a free album. Nobody was listening because it's hard, very difficult, to start a new radio show and to get attention. It's a little bit easier now because people have gotten a lot more proficient in their public relations and all, in their advertising. But it was very difficult then. And we started out getting people just one at a time to listen. And then Art Bell heard me. I guess Art Bell, it didn't hear me on the radio show. He had a lot of people called into the Art Bell show. And this was about in 97, I think, 98. And he called me one day, and he said, I don't know who you are, but everybody's telling me I need to have you on my radio show. It has to do with the Gulf War illness issue. What do you know? And I said, well, I know the government's lying, and these people are dying. And I said, the government is corrupt in the care they're giving these veterans, and they're going to end up dying in large numbers. And so he said, well, why don't you come on my show tonight? And he said, no, first of all, he said, fax me your evidence for everything that you've just told me here. And I faxed him reams of stuff. And I'll never forget me sitting in my studio, in my little bedroom there, faxing all this stuff to this guy named Art Bell that I really had never listened to, but I knew that he was on the radio, and I knew he had a name. So he did several hours with me. And if you go online, you can hear all those, a lot of those old archived programs of Art Bell and myself. The thing that's interesting is that we would do 3 hours a night, And we probably did 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, probably 18 hours at least of radio shows between Art Bell and myself. And nothing that I ever said has been proven to be inaccurate. Nothing out of those 18 hours. And so Art then had me on the show many, many times. And then, of course, it changed over to George Norrie, and I was on George Norrie's show and have done a number of shows there talking about the Gulf War illness issue. But yet, though the people have now learned, many of the veterans have learned that they've been lied to by the government continues the facade, continues the lies, and continues playing the game of, oh, gee, we just can't figure out why all these people are dying. And in reality, I mean, every one of these military people are just they've been kicked to the side of the curb. Every one of them. It's just so sad. Every military person that I see has some problem, usually from the Gulf War I, Gulf War II, or Afghanistan. They're just ill with compassion.
Joyce, let me interject here for a very quick minute, and I apologize very much for doing this. Phil, would you please check the chat room, because we're getting messages that people cannot, I repeat, cannot hear the program, and I've watched a few messages. So for whatever it's worth, you might want to check into or look into that.
Thank you.
Because
JP,
we're losing audience.
Yes, thank you, Larry.
All right, let me just check. I'm just going to check the streams here. We got. No, we've been knocked offline. At the beginning of the show, it was all working well, and so I'll just restart the streams, and we'll be good in a second. This show is being recorded. This is a pre-recorded interview, so we're still recording, and there's been no interruptions there.
In Maryland, Washington D.C. and Maryland before I
went
to California.
There it's going now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, JP, and thanks for speaking up about that, Larry. I was frozen here on my own computer. I'm hoping to reset it at the break. That was an important interruption, as you might guess, Joyce, but now that we've got it fixed, do you want to pick up where you left off there? Working with Art Bell and bringing the story of Gulf War illness to the airwaves, and I believe his program, Coast to Coast, was reached millions of people overnight. Did it not?
Oh, it reached millions and millions. He probably had 10 million listeners, and I put a sign on my car, American Gulf War Veterans Association. It was like a vinyl sign. And I would go around the country, and I was talking to veterans groups everywhere to tell them what was going on, because it wasn't working just on the radio. I went into every town that I could to talk to them, to talk to the veterans as to why they were sick. And I have to tell you that I got stopped by police officers so much that I finally took the sign off, believe it or not. Well, there's another reason I had to take it off. My insurance company forced me to take it off, too. But
wow.
There was another reason I had to take it off, and that is the police officers that had heard me on Art Bell would stop me. And this one guy, I will give an example. This highway patrolman stopped me in one state, and he pulled me over, and I said, what's wrong, officer? And he said, ma'am, I could get fired for what I'm doing. He said, and I'm not supposed to stop you. I don't have a reason to stop you, but I could get fired for stopping you. And I said, what's the matter? And I didn't even think about it in my car. And he said, ma'am, he said, I've heard you, are you the nurse on Art Bell? And I said, yes. And he said, I just had a baby born that is deaf. And I want to know, have you heard about any other babies that have been born deaf from the Gulf War because their parents have served in the Gulf War? And I said, yes, I'm sorry to tell you. And he said, because I called the DOD and the VA, and they told me that no other babies had been born deaf. And I said, they're lying to you. I said, because yes, they have been. And he began to cry. and I had a copy of the documentary Gulf War Illness Fact or Fiction, and I handed it to him, and I said, here, you watch this, and I think you'll understand more about it, and if you have any questions, give me a call. And another time, I can remember we were traveling at 3 a.m., coming home from some event that we'd been speaking at, and another police officer stopped me and said, are you the nurse on Art Bell? I mean, so many people heard that. You cannot imagine. So many Gulf War veterans. Another time, an 18-wheeler flagged me over on an interstate, and we had a CB, and he could see that we had a CB in the car. And he told me on the CB, he said, pull over at the next exit. I have to talk to you. And so we did, and he said, I'm a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL. And he said, I think I'm ill as a result of the Gulf War. He said, can you just talk to me for a few minutes? So we spent time talking to him, and he was really, really sick, and he was really affected by the Gulf War. And it just broke my heart. But everywhere I would meet these guys, absolutely everywhere. And they were driving trucks, like this Navy SEAL said, I drive trucks because I can't be around people, because if I'm going to be around people, I'm afraid I'll kill somebody. And of course, then we get into all the drugs they took and all the other issues. I got a letter one time from a highway patrolman who told me, he said, I was a highway patrolman for 29 years. Then I went to serve in Desert Storm. And he said, never in my life have I ever even thought I would shoot anybody or need to shoot anybody. He said, but after Desert Storm, he said, I want to kill myself or someone else. And he said, my wife has left me. And he said, she thinks that I'm crazy now. And after 20-some years of marriage, he said, my whole life is just destroyed. And he says, I do want to die. And I said, well, would it help if I talked to your wife at all? And he said, would you please? So I talked to his wife, and I told her, I said, look, what's going on with your husband is something that's gone on with a lot of people. He's not alone in this, and he does need some help. And I said, I really feel for him because it's not his fault. So anyway, they got back together again, and they sent me a picture of them together, and they were working it out, and they were getting help for his Gulf War illness. But you see, it's the people that didn't know about it, the ones that suffered. That's why I went around the country talking to them. It's the ones that didn't know. Let me give you an example. I was in, I believe it was Roseburg, California. Rose something where they have a big VA or big veterans auditorium there. And there was lots and lots of veterans that came to that meeting in California. And I was talking about the fact that about 50% of the Gulf War veterans that came home had a sexually transmitted disease, and they were not unfaithful. And that was like a shock to everybody. They'd never heard that before. And I said, 50% of the people that came home from the Gulf War had STDs, had herpes, and I said, and they had not been unfaithful. I said, how does that happen?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in about the third row, there was a man and his wife there that just began to cry. And they were crying and crying. And he was holding her and she was holding him. And I said, I stopped the meeting. And I said, could I help you? What's going on? And they said, I'm a pastor of my local church here, and I was a chaplain in the Gulf War. And he was a black man, and he said, I came home from the Gulf War, and he said, I had herpes, I had an STD, and I was never unfaithful to my wife. And he said, my wife and I have gone through hell because she just never could trust me, and she never believed me. And he said, and his wife was crying, and she said, now we have a marriage again. And she said, if only I would have known this. And see, that's what I wanted to stop, was the divorces that came because people didn't know why they were sick or why they had problems. I mean, this is criminal to do this to people that go to serve their country. They believe they're doing the right thing, and then the country stabs them in the back. Then they come home, they lose their families, they have nothing, they're homeless, and they're in so much pain, and they have nothing left. And that's what I was trying to stop, and I was trying to get the Department of Defense to stop it also. But they wouldn't, and they wouldn't tell people the truth. So the radio has been the one thing that has been the answer for all, yes. At least has gotten the message out to many of the Gulf War veterans.
That's fantastic. All the more reason to tune into the Power Hour and share it with others. Tune into wolfspiritradio.com and share our programming with others.
We're back on the air, JP?
Yes, you are.
Right. Well, I want to welcome everyone back.
And we have a caller.
Oh, okay. Well, can we go right to the caller? We've got our special guest, Joyce Riley. JP, I'll turn it over to you to take care of the caller.
All right. Area code 704. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
We'd love to hear what you have.
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you're on. Welcome.
Okay, this is Renee from North Carolina.
Hi, Renee.
And, I tell you what, y'all got the Three Musketeers on today. I tell you what, I've told Joyce this before, but I'm going to say it again. Her story is more important than she could pick the top 10 guests she's ever had, and it will not come close to her personal story. I don't want her to feel like she's being vain or talking about herself. She needs to go on the Power Hour, and she needs to tell this story again in length, because I listen to it every time, and I pick up another little tidbit each time, and I know there must be, how many other tidbits am I missing on this story? Because it's so important, because, you know, I'll bet when Larry was falsely put in prison, he never met one person in there who had killed 60 babies. And this is to prove my point that I say over and over again. You see, they pick on and wave around those FBI statistics to prove how horrible petty criminals are. But I'm telling you, the most criminality is growing in the middle and upper classes, because they're cut a break. Things are covered up, just like Joyce is telling about, and the evil is growing unencumbered there, and it won't come close to what's going on with the people they're putting in prison. 60 babies? Larry, did you ever meet anybody that came close to that?
Are you kidding? Of course not. No way. No way. No. Well, I've never met the president and vice president and secretary of state. But, you know, but then, of course, they weren't in prison. You know, but Joyce.
But go ahead, Larry. Hang on a second, Renee. Go ahead, Larry.
I just want to see what our sister Joyce got to say to our sister Renee. That's all.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I thank Renee so much for what she says. She's been such a good supporter of the Power Hour and such a, you know, good, she has such excellent input. And I just love what she says about, and I like that she just over and over again, she says, you know, if you're part of the cover-up, you are just as guilty. And I think we need to get this into people's minds to where people will start telling the truth and start sharing and getting it out. And it's only with people like her and with all of you. We've got to do this. We have to get people to talk about what's going on in the military and in corporate business, everywhere. Thank you, Renee.
Right.
And Joyce, I'm serious. I want you to do a huge show on this, because your story is more important than anything else you can do, is to blow the whistle on this. In fact, I tell you what, I've never had so much trouble. I was trying on 2 computers. The computer kept cutting off, and then I had a terrible time with the phone. I've never had so much trouble trying to get through on this darn phone, where my call kept getting dropped and everything else. You know, so the thing is, nobody, not any of you guys, are telling the truth, and you're pulling back the curtain, Joyce, that nobody else will pull back. And it's not going to stop. People need to know this, and you're liable to give somebody else who has been silent the courage to finally speak. We could get this ball rolling. I want you to do, I'd love to hear the entire 3 hours of you do this, and I'd even want a darn CD of the thing, because I'm telling you, your story and what you're saying here is more important than anything you can do. Please do this, Joyce.
Well, thank you, Renee. I will do that. I will do, maybe in this week, I think we have some shows I can do that, and do the entire show on just the whistleblowing issues and really the people that are culpable who are responsible for those things. There's so much more that I could talk about, so I will do that. Thank you, Renee, for inspiring me to do that.
Renee mentioned the show, the Power Hour, Joyce, and this morning the guest host had Gerald Salente on in the second hour, and the question that we've been touching upon, when you speak up and you look around and it seems like nobody wants to hear the truth that you're bringing forward, and it can be so frustrating, so disheartening. But then again, you come around and you tune into a show like this or the Power Hour, and you hear someone tell a story like yours, and then callers come in, and I think that was great about what you said, having a bumper sticker on your car, and even though you were being pulled over, maybe it was noticed, and they knew that it was related to some truth there, and also people hearing you on the nationally syndicated show Coast to Coast with Art Bell, that there are a lot of people that just don't know, and little things like we don't have to be a radio show host to do something. Any individual can put a bumper sticker on their car, or a button, or say something, start a conversation at the gas pump, and it was your own DVD that got me going, in plain sight. Somebody handed me that DVD and I plugged it in, and woke me up. And we've handed out tens of thousands of DVDs on 9/11 Truth and other issues ever since. I did want to ask Joyce, we were talking about the Power Hour earlier, and how you got started back in 2001, and you were dealing with the Gulf War illness and all the cover up and of that. Then 9/11 happened, in September of 2011, and I do know that your documentary In Plain Sight, I believe that was put out in 2005. What happened in between 9/11 and you folks actually putting that documentary out? I know not everybody woke up to 9/11 right off the bat. What was the case for you and Dave there at the Power Hour?
Well, I have to give the credit to him, because he would not be satisfied with what was happening, and it was really Dave on Tice that was really behind that. I have to give him all the credit. He it was insatiable with him, his desire to want to get to the truth. And I have to even say that I was almost a little bit negative toward doing that documentary, because I couldn't even believe it myself. I actually could not believe all that information that he had come up with, that it was accurate. And sure enough, it's turned out to be, pretty much everything that he did in that documentary is true. And that just, you reach a level that you think, oh no, okay, now I'm saturated. I can't take any more. And then you find out there's more, and there's more, and there's more. And now we have, events on top of events now that are happening, that everything is pretty much fraudulent that we're being told. One thing I wanted to go back, I wanted to tell about a couple of situations. Larry and I were talking during the break. There was another situation in Indiana. I was talking to a veterans group there. And, in the way that the families were never told the truth, they were never told that there was an organization that was set up for children that had been affected by the Gulf War illness, the children of the people that served. And so I was speaking at this group, and I was telling them that there was a problem with them bringing home their uniforms, because the uniforms had depleted uranium, chemicals, biologicals, of course, their uniforms, they didn't wash out. And so I said that if anybody brought home uniforms, be very careful of the equipment that you have and where you store it. If you're going to put it in some rental shed or something, whatever, if you have to keep it, but understand that there's chemicals, biologicals, and depleted uranium in much of that equipment. And that can affect your family members and make them ill. And again, the same thing happened, Larry. There was a lady that just started crying in the back of the room. And so we went to a break. I went up to her and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "When my husband came back from the war," she said, "shortly after that, my son started behaving really bizarre and started throwing up and being sick, and they told me that he was just imagining it and he was just acting out." And she said, "But he was really sick. But they put him in a psychiatric facility. He was only like 4 years old. I mean, this was horrible. Put him in a psychiatric facility, and they started giving him all these drugs." And she said he got worse and worse on the drugs, and he's in that psych facility now. He's been there for 2 months. And they say that it's because he's just, wants to be sick for whatever reason. And she said, "I know my son is really sick, and now I can't get him out of there." And I said, "Do you have any of your husband's equipment?" And then she began to get hysterical then. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "All my husband's uniforms and all his equipment are stored under my boy's bed." And, oh, my gosh. And I said, "Oh, dear God, you've got to get that out of there." And she said, "I am going to the hospital right now. I'm going to go tell them what you just told me, and I am going to get my son out of the hospital." And as I understood, they were able to do something, and they were able to get the child out of the hospital. But they had just been leaving that child in there and thinking he was imagining it, just like they called the Gulf War illness. People imagined that they had Gulf War illness. They didn't imagine they had Gulf War illness. They were sick. And so that was one story that I thought was that helped people understand, don't have your uniforms around your children.
Right.
Don't have them around your family. Get your equipment, and if you go to any of these salvage places or Army surplus places, just be careful if you go and buy camos there. If they've been to the Middle East, you've got to understand they're probably full of depleted uranium. And I don't think people realize that now, but they probably have. And so the Department of Defense got so furious at me going around and giving these meetings that I was giving them at the American Legions. The commander of the American Legion in Washington, D.C. sent out a memo that I was not to be allowed in any American Legion. That's how bad it got. I was not allowed to come in and participate in doing those programs or have the use of those facilities. And they told them that I was trying to make people think that Gulf War veterans were sick. And just like the Agent Orange, they said, she's trying to make people think that Gulf War veterans were sick, just like with Agent Orange, trying to imply that people really didn't have problems with Agent Orange either. So then I was not allowed, and I still had the memo. If you go to, by the way, all the documents that I have that support what I'm saying is at GulfWarVets.com, GulfWarVets.com. And there is a letter from the American Legion director there. There's also a letter from a number of organizations that tried to trash what I was doing. I put them all up on the Hall of Shame, so you can see them there, the people that were trying to take the side of the Department of Defense. And also, there is a document. If you have Agent Orange, go to the search engine and put in Agent Orange classified report. It's been declassified, but I think you're going to be shocked to find out what is there. There was an admiral that wrote a not for release to the public document. It was classified, but I know that it has been declassified now, and you can see it on that website at gulfwarvets.com. But the DOD got so furious at me, they called me one day, and they told me that I was not allowed to give out the documentary Gulf War Elders Fact or Fiction any longer. It was Commander Chalker Brown of the Pentagon. He was a Navy commander. Called me and said, Captain Riley, as you know, I was a captain in the Air Force. I was a flight nurse, which had been my goal all my life, was to be a flight nurse. That's all I wanted to be. I didn't really want to be a nurse. I wanted to be a flight nurse, and I got to do that in a C-130. And so he called me and he said, Captain Riley, this is Chalker Brown of the Pentagon, and you are not allowed to give out the Gulf War Illness Fact or Fiction to any military people. And I said, really? I said, which part of it is inaccurate? And he said, it's not that. It's that you are part of us. You are one of us. And he said, it's not allowed to be given out. And I said, no, sir. If you think I'm going to participate in the wholesale manslaughter of our military, you're wrong. I said, so until you can show me what is inaccurate in that, I'm going to continue to give it out. And I went and I had 1,000 of them made immediately because I was afraid they were going to come and storm my house and take them. So we got a lot of extras made. Then it got even worse. And I'd been asked to speak at a college in Michigan. It's Saint something in Michigan. And Dr. Rogers had asked me to come up and speak on Gulf War illness. And they were going to have all the students come and listen to 3 subjects. And mine was one of the subjects. And I was really honored that they would do that. So I go to the meeting, or the night before I'm supposed to leave to go to Michigan. Dr. Rogers called me, and he said, Joyce, we've got a problem. He said, the DOD has called here 3 times, and they don't want you to speak. And they told us not to allow you to speak. And I said, really? I said, well, what are you going to do? And he said, we've decided that if they would call 3 times to tell us we shouldn't hear it, we probably need to hear it. And I said, great. I said, I will be there. So I went there, and I got there at about 4 o'clock. We're having dinner with all the PR people and the alumni or whatever, you know. We're just having a nice big dinner before I was supposed to do the program that night. And the guy who's the PR director gets called away to the phone, and he comes back and he says, we've got a problem. He said the DOD just landed at the airport in a DOD plane. And he said, they're coming to the meeting. And I said, fantastic. That is awesome. That is the best thing I could imagine. So we go in, and he said, Joyce, are you sure you want to do this? 3 people from the DOD are here. I said, absolutely. I said, everything I have to say is true and accurate. I said, or I wouldn't be saying it. So we go into the meeting, and they're just full. The whole auditorium's full. And I said, and I introduced myself, and I said, and how many of you all are students? They raised their hands. How many of you all are professors? And they raised their hands. And I said, how many of you all were paid to be here tonight? Not one hand went up. And I said, I understand there's 3 people from the DOD here, from the Assistant Secretary of Defense's office, and I would like to have them recognized. And they didn't stand up. And I said, well, since I'm only a captain, and I understand Lieutenant Colonel Thompson is here, I said, I defer to rank. I said, I'd like for you to be recognized, sir. I don't want to continue until you're recognized.
Good for you, Joyce. Good for you.
It was quiet. And then, all of a sudden, in the back of the room, 3 people stand up in the very back row. And I said, I want to welcome you here tonight, and I said, I want you to know that I am going to say some of the most damning evidence ever against the Department of Defense, and I'm going to prove it with your documents. I said, so let's begin. But I said, but before I begin, I want you to agree that if there is anything that I say that is not accurate here tonight, I want you to stop me, or it will stand as accurate.
Good for you.
I began the program, and I went through all the documents, a lot of it which is in Gulf War Illness, Fact or Fiction, and Beyond Treason, a lot of those documents. I went through all of that stuff. It took 3 hours. And at the very end, the 3 people from the DOD, they left out of there so fast, they did not stand up once, because I told them, if you don't stand and tell me it's inaccurate, then I am going to consider it as being right and correct. So they never stopped me. But here's what I found out later, is I left the next morning to catch a flight to come back. They called a news conference. They were so upset at what I had said, they called a press conference. And there had been a lot of media people that had been there that night. They invited them back, and there were about only 28 people at the media people that were there. And I got the report later and the video of the event that, as it happened. But Colonel Thompson, in his, light blue uniform, he was like, dancing from the waist down. He was doing a PowerPoint on how great the military is and how wrong Joyce Riley was. And so one of the ladies who was an investigative reporter stood up after about 10 minutes of his real bizarre kind of, we are so great, we don't do anything wrong, that kind of thing. And she said, Colonel Thompson, she said, I think I need to stop you and tell you that I don't think there's one person in this audience that's believing a word that you're saying. Wow.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then she said, is it true that the United States sold, that like Captain Riley said, that the United States sold weapons to Iraq just before the Gulf War? Is that accurate? And he said, there's no way that we could possibly know that, because, that's all compartmentalized information, and I'm sure she doesn't have anything that can prove that. And she said, you saw her show the evidence of the sale of those biologicals to Iraq last night. And she said, that's when she said, there's not a person believing anything that you're saying here. Then the hook comes out from the side of the curtain, and somebody comes out and says, Colonel Thompson, you're needed in Washington right away. Your plane is ready to leave.
Boy, you really have to give that reporter credit, Joyce.
Yes, absolutely.
And perhaps you inspired her to stand up and tell the truth. I know nowadays that woman would probably not have a job the way things have progressed with the media, but there is no alternative. We have to speak up, and it doesn't have to be everybody. You turn everywhere you turn, left and right. You don't see anyone joining with you, but there are, and it's cases like this that they're being the first out on the dance floor. It's a lonely business, but eventually people will join in, and I believe that's what Gerald Celente was sharing this morning on the Power Hour. That old quote from, what is it, Larry? The quote from Margaret Mead. Something about a handful of... Go ahead, Larry. You're usually good with the quotes.
Well, Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful people can make a difference. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. That's Margaret Mead. There you
go. Amazing. And I know we're getting to about just a half hour left in the program, and I know... there are people, myself included, that would like to hear the story of Joyce Riley and the Power Hour from where you've been with the being a whistleblower on the Gulf War illness and putting out the film Beyond Treason, which is still a great tool, folks. Get those DVDs out there and put them in the hands of folks, or send a link to beyondtreason.com. Joyce, would you mind shifting gears a little, and with the time we have left, maybe bring us up to speed on where the Power Hour went from there, and how it's transformed into the even better program that it has been in recent times. It's just a marvelous program.
Well, thank you. I guess I wanted a show that could be based on accuracy, could be based on truth, that you could take this information. and that you would know that it was real, that it was documented. And that's what I have always wanted, is something that you could take to the bank that you knew was accurate. So that's why I based it on my experience and a lot of things that I've been involved in, because I have been involved in so many, and I know what is accurate about what I was involved in. Oh, there's stuff all over the internet. There's one person that is actually put on the internet that I was the one that was really killing those babies, not Genene Jones. I mean, people are crazy, and they will do anything to try and mitigate what you have to say and your credibility. I mean, there are people that, when I was on Art Bell show, I had one guy call in and say, by the way, this woman, we checked her out. She's not even a nurse. She was never a flight nurse. She is such a phony. I can't believe you would have her on the show. And, I mean, people would do anything and everything to try and stop you. My life has been really, I would say, I don't want to say difficult. It has been very challenging as a result of taking the stands that I have taken, because I won't back down. I will not back down. And the Power Hour took off, I think, as a show that was based on the real deal information. That if we couldn't prove it, that either we would back out of it, or we would say, I'm sorry, I can't prove it, or we would call it chatter. But I think that's why the Power Hour did so well. And then we got people on like Larry, and people like, like you heard today on the Power Hour, is that the people that are out there really, really standing for what counts. And they may not make the money in this world, they may not make the friends in this world, but they will make they'll have respect, because they are really standing for what is right. And that's what I love so much, and that's why that's how I choose the people that are guests on the Power Hour, is that I want to know what's really happening. And I know right now this new plane that has gone down on AirAsia, I want to hear about that. And I'm anxious to hear from Matthias Chang, the attorney that we've had on the Power Hour several times from Malaysia. I want to hear what he has to say about what's going on there, because there's just so many fraudulent lies. And of course, it's no secret that I would tell all of you, there's no secret that I have cancer now. It's no secret that I've been trying natural remedies, which for whatever reason did not work for me. And so now I have a challenge. It's how am I going to get my story out while I have the time? Because I want people to know. I want people to know about things like COINTELPRO. I still can't believe, Larry, when you talk to me about COINTELPRO, I still cannot believe people do not realize that Martin Luther King was killed by the government, that he was sent letters, that he was threatening him. I still can't believe people don't know that today. But because they make it look like, oh, we just love the guy and we have a Martin Luther King Day, then everybody's supposed to think that the government is so good involved in this. And yet, we have such a job to do to get people to understand what is really happening and what's really taking place. And that's why you guys have got to go on. You've got to carry on. The people like Dr. Stan Monteith, that I respected probably more than anybody in the business, because he was totally 100% documented. He never said anything he could not prove, and he backed me up a couple of times on things and said, now wait a minute, Joyce, are you sure you can prove that? Because he didn't want anything on his show on Radio Liberty that could not be proven. And he is just the most awesome man, and he will go down in history for honesty and truth and documentation, and of course for his book that he wrote on, and exposing the people really that are behind the evil within our government. So we've got a job to do, and we've got everybody to get involved. And if your job is just to give $5 a month to Wolf Spirit Radio, then do that. But we need everybody to get involved in this. If we don't stand, we're going to fall. And I'm not one of those people that's going to fall. I've given up too much in my life, and I've stood for too much to let it go down now.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
and you're not alone, Joyce. And there are people that do pick up the torch. I mean, you've got wonderful networks like James Corbett of the CorbettReport.com is one. You know, our friend Jack Blood is back on the air pretty strong in his old time slot on another network. You know, and one of the things that really attracts me to the Power Hour is Larry and I are pretty keen on the problems with the left-right divide and how that really neutralizes the power of the people. And the people do have power, and I think that's evidenced by your story of being a whistleblower on the Gulf War illness, and how the Pentagon really put an effort, Department of Defense, into shutting you up. And that's very, very telling, because the people armed with the truth do have power. And I think we can all take a lesson from that, in that if we do speak up and have the truth on our side, we can have an effect on this criminality that's being perpetrated on us all. But the thing about the left-right divide, and Larry and I have been talking about this for quite some time, that I believe, and Bob Bowman, our late friend Bob Bowman, also in the last years of his life was really harping on that as long as the people are divided, and left-right is so strong, we're neutralized, to use a term out of COINTELPRO. Our power is neutralized, and one of the things that really pleases me about the Power Hour is you as the host, and in turn the callers and the listeners who are very much a part of the program in being allowed to participate with the calls. So many have transcended this left-right divide, and that gives me hope. And in order to be heard, you have to listen. And that's another thing about you, Joyce, is you've had guests of different stripes on and different ends of the spectrum, and they rub some of the listeners one way or the other, but you still give them their time. And if something is questionable, you actually speak up and question it, you know, and you don't just let something fly, but you do it in a way that's respectful and allows them to tell their side. And you find very little of that on some of the other programs, and so I really believe that we need to keep talking up the Power Hour and use, you know, it's a great model for other programs, and I think there are other programs that are modeling that. And
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And you know this thing about left-right paradigm, there is no difference between the two. But if there's anybody that believes that all the people in this country, they now say we have 320 million people in this country, if anybody believes that we can be kind of brought down to the lowest common denominator of only two political thoughts, are you kidding me? There's no room for anything other than two. There is room for only two, because they want that divide to be there. And I don't know anybody that's been more more aggressive about talking about this than you, Philip, because you talk all the time about the importance of getting people to realize that the left-right paradigm is a reason for why we're in the situation that we're in, a reason. And once we can get rid of that, I was asked to run against Tom DeLay in Texas. And they were going to give me a lot of money to run, and you know how you get into that, where you have to accept the money if you want to run, and you have to accept their whatever they tell you to do. But the reason I didn't do it was because they said I had to agree to believe in abortion, and I said I can't do that. So I was not going to run in that election. I did not want to I was kind of getting involved in that, and as a U.S. representative, and I decided not to do it. But, left-right doesn't mean squat, doesn't mean anything. It has no meaning. left, right, red, blue means nothing. It is a game, and it is part of the fraud. And I just look at it every time I see on TV the left-right paradigm or the blue and red, Republican, Democrat. I just look at that as being the fraud. And they are trying to perpetrate more fraud on us, and to think that people actually believe if we can just get our guy in there, then everything will be okay. I can't believe people even believe that anymore. I mean, Larry, that's got to be that. I mean, you can't be very smart and actually believe that nowadays.
You're right. You're right. And the fact is that people. I will say this, Joyce. I do believe strongly that thanks to the shows like the Power Hour, more and more people really are awakening, and they are rejecting this nonsense, this left-right paradigm. They're beginning to I call it the plantation. They just keep us on the plantation. Oh, yeah. That's so-and-so's plantation. Oh, that's Mr. So. No, I'm with, it's just nonsense. But it's very insidious. So insidious. And, and I know some of my, left-leaning or left friends get very annoyed, at me for saying this. But you know what? The truth is the truth is the truth. And, yes. And it needs to be put out there. And if we don't have the common sense, the common courtesy, the common decency, and the common humanity to be able to communicate with each other as human beings, just like Brother Malcolm said, if we're going to disagree, do it in the closet, but come out united around our common issues. So if we really did that, we wouldn't have a left-right paradigm. We wouldn't have that, so I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Well, but to tag on to that, Larry, you often mention, and I think this is a big myth that keeps us divided into the one choice or the other, the choice of one or the other. And you say it very well, Larry. People think that working together with people that you disagree with on who knows how many issues, right? And Joyce mentioned your story that, and we do have it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and also on Larry's website, blackactivistwg.org, and that the YouTube's entitled Larry Pinckney, A Prison Experience. And it's a great story, Larry. How when you were in prison, there was a lot of killing going on. This was out in the state penitentiary in California. And you were a known member of the Black Panther Party, and there were the black groups, the Hispanic groups, and the white Aryan Brotherhood. And a lot of killing going on between the whites and the blacks, and all at the pleasure of the administration, of the prison system. It was for their pleasure. And that's much like what we're doing here with this left and right fighting each other while we get totally raped and pillaged by the criminal government that gives us this false choice, Democrat, Republican, left, right, conservative, liberal. But you often say, Larry, about agreeing 100% with somebody. I forget how you tell that. One of you is a liar if you say. Maybe you can clear that up for me.
Phil, I always say this is true. Yeah. If anybody agrees with somebody 100% of the time, we agree 100% of the time. Just take you and me, Phil. If you and me agreed 100% of the time about everything, Phil, one of us is lying.
One of us is lying. Exactly, but it really says it in the myth, Joyce. I don't know if I'm taking Larry's thunder here, but the short of the story with Larry's a prison experience, Larry Pinckney, is that he was in prison, as I mentioned. There was a lot of killing going on between the blacks and the whites, and they were just hurting themselves. You know, the prison administration, it was at their pleasure, you know. One of the Aryan brother leaders was getting set up, came to Larry asking for to defend him in Warden's court. And you know, you couldn't have been two more different groups, white Aryan brothers and the black groups. Joyce mentioned that it was the right thing to do. He was set up, and Larry accepted the invitation to defend him, and he did, and he successfully defended this fella. And another part of it was it stopped the killing, is the point. But here's the point I want to mention out of that. Is because they work together on this common issue at hand, which is they're killing each other at the pleasure of the administration. They were able to stop the killing, but that does not mean they had to give up or sell out their differences with each other. You know, you don't have to. And that's the problem. I think there's a myth there that people think if we work together, then we got to sell out on our beliefs and our differences, and that's not the case. And please go, folks listening, look up that video. It's on YouTube, Larry Pinckney, A Prison Experience, and share it with others. And we only have a couple of 12 minutes left, and we do have a caller from the 386 area code. You're online with our guest, Joyce Riley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been listening to most of the show. Some of parts of the show were cut out. Our sound went out, but thank goodness we were able to listen to most of the last hour. Just wanted to thank Joyce for coming on the air on We Cannot Be Silent and sharing her stories with us. She's an inspiring person. She has so much courage, and she's actually, today, listening to this, it's inspired me once again. I believe we all have different talents, and she's dedicated a lot of her life to bring the truth to people, but we might not be able to get on the airwaves or, have a show like Joyce did or go around the country talking to people, but we can do our part in small, different ways. And I think we all have talents that we can use to speak this truth and to get involved. And some of it does involve getting off the couch and into the community and talking to others, our neighbors, our friends, people that we don't know, when the occasion arises. And sometimes we make the occasion arise. But I just wanted to call in to thank Joyce for her dedication and her courage. And that's about all I have to say, really. We cannot be silent and sharing her story with us, Joyce. She's an inspiring...
I want to say something to what Kathy said about you may not be able to speak to people or have a radio show or whatever. I didn't have any of those things at one point, of course, and I kind of created my own, like she said, you create a scenario. One thing that I did, and I just want to show how you can come out of nothing. I was so much against NAFTA. I listened to Chuck Carter on the radio, and I was so much against NAFTA. I just could not stand it, and I really wanted to do something. So because nurses were in Chapter 16, I believe it was, of NAFTA, I decided I would start a group called Nurses Against NAFTA. But I couldn't find anybody that cared like I did, and nobody wanted to get involved in my group, Nurses Against NAFTA. So, to be honest, I found one other nurse that wanted to be involved in Nurses Against NAFTA. I made up a really good-looking letterhead. I sent out news releases to all the media that Nurses Against NAFTA were taking a stand against it, and the reasons why, blah, blah, blah. I sent out news releases every week, and I got a lot of attention. But that was because nobody knew that Nurses Against NAFTA was me in my upstairs bedroom and my fax machine at the time.
Yep.
And I got the attention of Ross Perot. And Ross Perot contacted me and said, I am impressed with your group, Nurses Against NAFTA. And I said, well, thank you very much. We're standing against NAFTA, blah, blah, blah. Thank goodness he never asked me how many nurses were in my group. And so
we organized a march, and I spoke at Washington, and the nurses were another nursing group, so I couldn't take credit for it. But I went over and met with Ross Perot afterwards, and he wanted to tell me how much he appreciated what I was doing and how much he believed that we were doing the right thing. But all of that came out of a business card that was made at the local store, print shop, and a letterhead. And that's how Nurses Against NAFTA was born. And that's how I kind of got my start in all of this, was to realize that I could make a voice, or could have a voice, if I just made it look like I had a voice. And that's part of it. You got to look good, smell good, walk good, talk good.
And fake it till you make it, as they say.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
there's an example of it. Oh, God bless you. We are getting short on time, Joyce, and there were a couple other things, Larry. If you didn't have anything, there is a comment from the chat room. One of the listeners, is a Power Hour listener, mentioned an alternative treatment for smoking and PTSD, lithium orotate. He heard about it from one of the guests on the Power Hour, and just wanted to report back that he's off the methadone, and and it helps with post-traumatic stress disorder. But you did mention earlier, Joyce, that some of these alternatives don't work for everybody, and everybody's got a different makeup. And you often mention on air that you are not doctors and you're not giving medical advice, but you do bring these alternatives to the listeners and ask that they think for themselves and really look into it. And also, we had a number of folks that I'm told we have 4 minutes. A number of other folks that want to know about your current health concerns, Joyce, and however much you're comfortable with sharing, and what, if anything, that we could do to help.
Well, I thank you very much for that. I am at a position now where I'm somewhat limited in what I can do, and I have a lot of pain. I am having to depend upon pain medicine, which I'm not liking at all, period. But I can still talk, and I can still make a difference that way. So that's what I'm thinking about doing now, and I'm doing the radio show a couple of times a week. And, of course, we've had Larry set in for us also, which I really appreciate so very much. Love to have Larry back on again on the show.
He did a great job, too, Joyce. He really did.
He really did. I am so proud of him. And
I'm proud of you.
Well, no, you did it. You did it. But I have cancer that has metastasized to the bone, the liver, and bone, liver, and my spine. And the spine is the biggest problem that I have now. And so they did radiation on that. And there's nothing else that can really be done. So it's just kind of a waiting game. So I've been talking to some people about some other things that I can try that I would like to investigate. I've done a lot of the alternative things, but they think that a lot of this comes from the vaccines that I got in the Gulf War, and probably, lots of the Gulf War veteran females have cancer now. Yes. And it's not like the cancer we used to have where you could eat natural foods and all of a sudden, and it would go away. There's a lot of things going on with this cancer that are a lot different, that are just, it just went so fast. So I'm just doing what I can do, and I am talking, and I'm going to continue to talk, and I just appreciate this opportunity to be on this show, to be able to say what I want to say, and I thank both of you for giving me this opportunity, and for Wolf Spirit Radio, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say these things, and we just got to keep doing it, guys. We cannot stop.
We appreciate you, Joyce, and we cannot stop. Go ahead, Larry.
Let me say this very quickly, and that is that, Joyce, there's one word to sum you up, and that word is precious. You are precious. So just remember
cry. That. You made me cry. You shouldn't do that. That is so kind of you, but thank you so much. Thank you so much, Larry. I appreciate you so much.
We appreciate you, Joyce, and although we didn't get a whole lot of callers in today, it was short notice and at a different time for us. I can say quite confidently that you are appreciated widely by so many people across the globe, and I want to encourage people to continue to tune into the Power Hour radio show each morning, Monday through Friday, thepowerhour.com. And we're running about 40 seconds left in the program. Larry, I'm going to let you take us out. Thank you again, Joyce. Thank you so much, and we look forward to speaking
Love you
further.
guys.
Love you. Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you so much. Come again. We love you. That's it. All power to the people.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.